Well, I think we'll get started for today, and I know we'll have some others trickle in, but thanks everyone for joining us on our Winter Wednesday webinars. I'm Danny McGarry. I'm Executive Director with Mason Lake Conservation District, and we've been doing this series to just try to grab some emerging new ideas and things going on with forestry and agriculture and kind of bring those out to our community so that we can talk them out, know what questions to ask for our landowners and kind of have that opportunity out there for people to learn a little bit more. So for this month's iteration, we will have another look at some carbon markets. And so we're joined today by Jordan Lutz with Forest Carbon Market from the company Forest Carbon Works. And Ben, so as we go through the presentation today, just a couple of quick tips. If you haven't been on Zoom recently or in a bit, if you're joining us and watching today, please just make sure that you stay on mute. So that's a little microphone button on the bottom left corner of your screen. And also if you keep your video off as well, same bottom left corner of your screen, that'll help with the connectivity issues in case your internet's lagging at all. So if you have questions along the way, you can put those in the chat down at the bottom in the middle, type those in. We'll try to catch them along the way and let Jordan know. Or also we'll have some time at the end. And Josh Shields is also on today with us. He's our Conservation District Forester. He'll help field some of those questions as well. So I think that covers the housekeeping. Do you want to take it away, Jordan?
Sure can. Thanks, Danny, and thanks, Josh, for the invitation to come talk about forest carbon markets and forest carbon works. It's a good day to be inside for a webinar. It's cold here. I'm located in north central Wisconsin. I'm the Midwest Regional Forester for Forest Carbon Works. And a little bit of background about me. Prior to joining Forest Carbon Works, I spent 2 years working in kind of large industrial forests, and then spent about 6.5 years working for a local county forestry department managing the timber and recreation side of things, and then joined Forest Carbon Works about a year and a half ago. So just a little bit of background about me. And today we'll talk about obviously our program here at Forest Carbon Works in more detail, but also we'll just I'll give you some background about the forest carbon market in general and just kind of opportunities for private landowners available. So with that, I think, yeah, Josh is going to capture questions. Do you guys want to take them at the end, Josh and Danny, or take them as we go?
We'll leave that up to you, Jordan. Generally, we try to wait till the end so that you can get through all the content.
Okay,
Danny, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
perfect. That works for me. So with that, we'll just jump right in. So a little bit of background about Forest Carbon Works and our Conserve program. And so kind of the last 20 years or so, carbon markets have always existed for about 20 years, but there's really been a large disconnect for private landowners to engage in that market. And the primary reason is the carbon market really was only available to private landowners who had 2,000 plus type acre lands. And so there's been a big disconnect for private landowners. The development costs for project developers is fairly expensive, about $250,000 just to get a program off the ground. And that process is generally about 3 to 5 years. So it's been pretty prohibitive for private landowners. And so our niche here at Forest Carbon Works is we try to capitalize on working with smaller private landowners and try to establish a passive revenue stream for those small landowners. We really hope that it helps protect forest conservation and help alleviate some of the financial pressures to owning forest land, and try to be a partner because of our contracts are fairly long term, that we try to partner in that long-term commitment for forest conservation. In Michigan, there's a strong tax law program, and that's one of the things that we look at as well in our assessment. We are compatible, but we want to make sure you are meeting those tax law program requirements first, and then looking at a carbon program as an additional source of revenue if it's compatible. But we'll get into details more on that. here later in these slides. So a little bit more about Forest Carbon Works. So we are a spin-off of a company called EP Carbon in 2016. And EP Carbon is essentially our international kind of parent company. Forest Carbon Works is only operated and developed here in the US. It's only available for US landowners. And we were acquired by a company called Chestnut Carbon in 2022. So if you look on the bottom of my slides, you'll see the Chestnut logo, and then you'll see the Forest Carbon Works logo. And so the Chestnut Carbon leg of our business deals with afforestation and reforestation, primarily in the Southeast, where we are replanting properties that were not previously forest land in the 10 years and planting it back to kind of a native restoration project where we'll plant anywhere from 25 to 35 different species of hardwoods. And this is really a unique and rare opportunity. One, because it only is for the carbon capture of those trees, but two, it's never been done in the Southeast at this scale that we're doing it. It's just typically lands that has been rotationally planted back to loblolly pine plantations. And so a unique part of our business, just thought I'd worth mentioning it. To give that into perspective, we plant about 7 to 9 million trees a year and currently own about 32,000 acres as part of our Chestnut Carbon business. And so the Forest Carbon Works side, what we're talking about today, deals with existing forest lands across the country in the US. And we work in all different cover types as long as that is forested and trees are at least 5 inches in DBH. That's what we call or define as a forest. So combined, we have a lot of a deep bench of different professionals and carbon market experts. The picture on the right is actually our forestry team. And so we have teams designated to each region. We have foresters and sales teams, land acquisitions teams, a marketing team, and then a certification team. But our foresters are all in the 5 regions: the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest is me, the Appalachian area, the Northeast area, and the Southeast area. And so that kind of keeps things nice to keep local experts in each area to help guide with the different forestry technical assistance needed when helping to navigate a carbon program. And so one of the main things that why we can work with smaller private landowners is we've come up with a sole proprietary software that helps keep our operational costs low and streamlines our carbon inventory approach. And so what we've invented is essentially a smartphone app using georeferenced laser built into a camera on a smartphone. And so we can capture inventory using those pictures through a carbon cruise. And then those pictures are analyzed through our data processing team to get us all of the measurements that we need to compute the carbon outputs. And so we're collecting all the same traditional forestry measurements of DBH and height, composition, density, but we're doing it through our technology and our process. And so that's a big reason why we can work with smaller private landowners. So when we talk about carbon offset potential in private forests, the map on the right is probably something most folks have seen before. And it's not a surprise that mostly in the US, about 60% of the forests are owned privately, and forests offset about 16% of US annual emissions. And so there's a tremendous opportunity for private landowners who have forest land to engage in that market. But we also recognize we're at an interesting time in history where conservation is becoming expensive. There's a lot of pressure from paying taxes to changing in ownerships, financial pressures to develop, to fragment, to parcelize different properties because of conservation becoming expensive. And so our program really hopes to kind of get at that, alleviate some of that financial pressure and try to keep forests intact, kind of using the carbon market as a profitable conservation practice. And so obviously there's a lot of opportunity to make some extra income, but also help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with all the forest land across the US. So To kind of put that in perspective, about 81% of carbon offset projects are occurring in forests. So a big chunk here occurring in the US. And so that's where we only operate in the lower 48 states, but anywhere there's forest land. So a question we get a lot is, are carbon credits, are they working? And so we do a lot of our own research as well as looking at other published papers, and we're finding that carbon companies that are committing to buying carbon offsets are decarbonizing twice as fast. And so I recognize that it really takes a twofold approach to reduce emissions at the source, but also what they can't reduce, that's where kind of carbon credits can come into play, is buying those carbon offsets. And so that's primarily driven by these large kind of corporations looking to make these commitments and buy these credits. But when we're looking at selling credits on the market, we really do vet our buyers. We want to make sure that they're a good fit for our program and meeting the objectives as what we are about as a company. So just a bit of background about carbon storage and forests, just to give some context. So no surprise that sources of carbon, a big bulk of that being 91% being for fossil fuel combustion, and then the other 9% being of land use change. So when we talk about carbon sinks, there are three different kind of natural processes for carbon being stored. Atmosphere at 44%, the ocean at 26%. And then terrestrial or forested ecosystems at 31%. There is carbon capture technology that is still a long ways off from companies to utilize, primarily being it's extremely expensive for companies to do. And the reason that carbon developers are interested in forested systems is, of the three carbon sinks, forested ecosystems are the only private option to utilize. The other ones no one owns, so it's hard to develop a project when it's a public entity. So when we do our carbon inventory, we're doing a carbon inventory on above ground woody biomass. And so of that, about 40% of carbon is being stored in trunks and branches, a small percent in woody debris, and then the large chunk, 45% in soil organic matter. But in terms of our program, we were just looking at above ground woody biomass. So it can be standing, it can be dead, but anything above ground that's 5 inches tall and 5 inches in DBH and 15 feet tall, that's what we're capturing and quantifying on a property. And so when we get to the assessment process of looking at a private landowner's property, we use a blend of two things. We're looking at aerial imagery. We're looking at soil productivity maps. We're looking at growth rates for that area. And that gives us a pretty good estimate of the ability of growth in that forest, how much carbon is being stored and to be stored through the growth of that forest. And then we also pair that with our boots on the ground crews to collect that more traditional forest tree inventory. And from those two things, that each property is getting assessed individually for that productivity. And that's how we're determining a carbon output and ultimately what we can pay the landowner. So in terms of market options available throughout the US, there's two different markets. There's the compliance market, which is right now only in California and Washington. And that's a government regulated market. And so in that market, if you are an entity that has emissions, you're required to track that. And as part of that, you are also required to buy a certain amount of carbon offsets. That's the compliance market. We at Forest Carbon Works work into the voluntary market, which is exactly like it sounds. It's a personal choice. It's a commitment from companies to buy these offsets. At this time, there's no current regulation to enroll. There's no government entity overseeing it. It's completely 100% voluntary. And so the option, there's three different registries in the voluntary market. There's Verra Carbon Standard, which is the bulk of all carbon projects, including ours, are under that Verra registry. There's a Climate Action Reserve and the American Carbon Registry. And then from there, as a carbon developer, you have 3 different projects types that you can pick from. You have avoided conversion, which neither Chestnut or Forest Carbon Works operate in. But then you have reforestation, afforestation, which is our Chestnut leg of our business. And then you have the improved forest management side, which is what Forest Carbon Works deals with. So right now, the voluntary market is estimated around $2 billion, and it's anticipated to be worth over $40 billion by 2030. And the biggest commitment and driver to that is a lot of large Fortune 500 companies, tech companies, people like Microsoft, some car manufacturers are committing to reducing their footprint. And so they're actively looking to reduce emissions, but they're also actively looking to buy carbon offsets as a part of that equation to reduce emissions. So what we hope to do at Forest Carbon Works is to improve market access, really. And so we do that by offering competitive payments and a revenue share option available for landowners. And I will get into those details in the coming slides about those options for payment for landowners. Our contracts are fairly long. They're 60-year commitments at a minimum. And so that's showing a nice commitment from not only landowners, but to the purchasers that there's a long-term commitment to forest sustainability. At FCW, we manage all of the responsibility of the audits, the certifications costs, the registry audits, all those things we are managed by our team of professionals. As I mentioned earlier, we have kind of specific niches in different teams to handle different aspects of the demand of developing a carbon project. I also recognize that there's been a lot of market complexities and trust issues within the carbon market. It's a relatively new space. We've been around since about 2019, and for a carbon developer, that's a fairly long time, 6 years. But we hope to be more transparent in the process, using our bench of professionals in different avenues, be very selective in who we're selling carbon credits to, and try to make it as easy and streamlined as possible using our software and technology to make it easy and understand the carbon market, where it's going, where we're at, and try to be more transparent in that process for landowners. So kind of more about the eligibility requirements about our Conserve program. To be eligible to participate, you need a minimum of 40 acres of forest land. It does not have to be continuous. It can be in different parcels, but it does have to meet 40 acres of forest land. And so we're defining forest land. Keep in mind that the trees have to be 5 inches in DBH and at least 15 feet tall to meet our forest land definition. We are available throughout the entire lower 48 states. Our contracts start at a 60-year commitment, and that's broken down into 2 different periods. There's a payment period that starts at 25 years, and then it's always followed by a 35-year monitoring period. And I'll also get into details in the next slide or next couple slides about those 2 different periods, what that means. Our payments start at $10 an acre per year for that duration of that payment period, or landowners have the choice to opt into a 25% revenue share option. So the payments, the flat rate payments, are based on each property's productivity. So for example, in the Pacific Northwest, that flat rate payment is going to be higher than it is in the Midwest because of their productivity and growth rates. The revenue share option is a straight revenue share based on a 12-month trailing market price of what we're selling carbon credits for. So generally speaking, it's a nice option for landowners to have that guaranteed flat rate payment, or some landowners like that option to try and capitalize on the carbon growth and opportunities there with that revenue share option. So with our program, which is really unique to our program, is we do offer harvest flexibility, and we do offer a free Forest Stewardship Council certification included in our membership. And so the harvest flexibility, the way we allow for harvesting is we set aside 10% of the carbon from that property. It's set aside essentially in a buffer pool. We call it an uncredited reserve. That uncredited reserve is kept just for climate smart forestry harvesting. And so a big portion of my job is reviewing management goals for landowners if they're enrolled in a tax lot program or have a forest management plan. That's what part of I'm reviewing is what harvesting is occurring, how much volume is going to be cut, what years, kind of the prescription, all the details that go into that. And so that's unique to our program in that we don't necessarily care how or when. We just say you have this 10% of allotment of carbon. You can use it as you see fit. The Forest Stewardship Council certification is something that's a nice benefit for landowners to say that they have an FSC certification, but it's also a nice benefit for contractors or loggers looking to do a timber sale. Oftentimes mills want to procure more of that FSC certified wood. And so maybe they're willing to go further to buy it, or in some cases they may even pay a little more for it. One thing about our conserve program is that we have an approved methodology with Vera, and we have sold credits multiple times now at a very high premium. Last fall, we sold credits at $34 per ton, which has been the highest ever publicly disclosed for an improved forest management project. So it's a good thing. It's a good feather in our cap to say that we're doing that, and it really shows that we have a really high quality program that we've built, and a lot of buyers are interested in our credit. So what is required? I mentioned that you need a minimum of 40 forested acres. You must own the timber rights, and that goes hand in hand with you cannot have an overly restrictive easement on the property. And by that, it just ties into you must have the legal authority to harvest your timber. So that's what I mean by a no overly restrictive easements. Also, we'll review each easement independently. All easements are not created equal. And so we just want to know what the easement is and to make sure that it is going to be compatible. You must be willing to enroll all of your eligible forest land. So if you own land in multiple counties or multiple states, it all must be enrolled with our program. You, as a landowner, we ask that you provide periodic access to our team and our forest technicians, and that's to conduct our inventories to work with you if you have a timber sale. That's the primary purpose of that. And so if your land maybe isn't eligible, it's a nice option to refer someone to us, as we do offer payment for those referrals. So here I'll get into the different periods of our contract. The first is our payment period. And again, that starts, and especially in Michigan, it would start at $10 an acre per year for that 25 years. Or you can opt into that 25% revenue share option as soon as we have a 12-month trailing market price option. And for landowners, you're not locked in for that entire 25 years. You can go back and forth between each payment option every 5 years. So again, maybe you want to opt for that 25% through 1 through 5, capitalize on some of the increase in carbon pricing, and then you go back to that flat rate payment. The flat rate payment is guaranteed once it's locked in. So regardless of what the carbon market does, goes up or goes down, it still stays at that flat rate payment, versus the revenue share. If it goes up or goes down, we share in that the market conditions. So you can extend the payment periods in 5-year increments all the way up to 50 years. But keep in mind, it's always going to be followed by that 35-year monitoring period, which the next slide, I'll go into detail on that. So you can get paid annually for anywhere from 25 to 50 years. The Forest Stewardship Council certification is managed by our team. We have a full certification team dedicated to that. If a landowner has a forest management plan, we will work with them to make sure it gets Forest Stewardship Council certified. That's part of my job as well. You do not need a forest management plan to enroll with us. We only require a forest management plan at the time that a commercial harvest is going to be conducted. And again, that's something that we can help with our staff to help a landowner do at no charge. We talked a little bit about the 10% of carbon. That's how we allow harvesting. We set aside that 10% of carbon to allow for forest management practices to occur. We recognize that, to maintain a healthy forest, you occasionally need to do some harvesting. So that's how we allow for that. We have an annual survey that's completed by landowners online once a year, and that takes maybe 15 minutes. And then when you're within our program, you have access to regional foresters and experts in each region to help assist in any questions throughout the process. Once you're a member of ours, we really have dedicated teams, whether that's our membership coordinators or membership advisors to regional foresters to help with that entire process. Excuse me. So one thing I'll worth noting on the harvesting side of things. So if there's a forest health issue, you can exceed that 10%. It's a good pest or oak wilt or emerald ash borer or maybe hemlock woolly adelgid. That 10% can be exceeded with no penalty in our program. And that's to make sure that you're maintaining a healthy forest. We want to give you that option to capitalize and try to mitigate any pest or pathogen, fungal, oak wilt, whatever it is, to help you mitigate that in your forest. So the second part of the contract is the monitoring period, and that's 35 years in length. And this period, I'll summarize it, is best put that we just ask that you maintain your forest land. So we don't want you to develop it into a parking lot. You gain a lot more flexibility in your harvesting during that period. You no longer are FSC certified, it's not required, and you no longer have to fill an annual survey. So during that time, we'll be pretty hands off. We'll just be monitoring the property from an aerial probably once a year to look for management changes to make sure that property didn't get, over harvested to the extent that it's pretty demolished, which most landowners in our program is not a concern, but that's really what we're asking for during that monitoring period. At that time, you could also look at enrolling into another carbon program after leaving ours. So a lot more flexibility during that monitoring period. And the 35 years is required by our registry. And so we have to adhere to that 35 years. So a little snapshot of where we are as a company throughout the US. Right now we have enrolled a little over 231 private landowners, and our membership is about 153,000 acres in our conserve program. Annually, we review about 3,000 unique individual landowners for membership. And just to give you an idea of how big of demand this is, in just the last 2 months, we've assessed just in the Midwest about 614,000 acres for payment in 2025, just in the first 2 months of the year. So a huge demand for private landowners to engage in this. We've allocated over $3.3 million to landowners within our program. And right now we've committed to about 12.6 million tons of CO2 and long-term storage being in those forests. So across the country, and you can see our membership, and it makes sense. In the Northeast, we have a lot smaller parcel sizes, so there's a lot more members. As you move to the West, the parcel sizes get bigger, the acreage get bigger, but there's less members. So we have a handful in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota kind of make up the bulk of our membership. But we definitely have a lot of interest in Michigan in general. So here's just some folks that are in our program, and each landowner is different for their goals for their property, but three things kind of come front and center when we talk about our program or why somebody's interested in our program, and that the properties that they own, they really are concerned about their legacy. They're also concerned about how to conserve it with the financial pressures, a lot of times for that next generation of who's going to own that property. And so the program like ours helps with to make conservation more profitable. It's a passive revenue stream. It alleviates some of that financial pressure, and it really promotes their legacy long term. In a lot of ways, I think our program acts similar to a conservation easement, but not in perpetuity, as our contracts are 60 years in length. versus conservation easements being in perpetuity. So kind of three things that kind of come front and center from different landowners from various walks of life in different parts of the country. So to become a member, you can go to forestcarbonworks.org and you can click Get Started. From there, you'll be directed to fill out an application. And the application is pretty simple. It maybe takes 10 to 15 minutes. And that's just to give us visibility on some details on the property to kind of get the assessment process started. Within 3 to 5 days, you'll be connected with one of our membership advisors to gather those more intricate details, and we'll start to review that application. Things at that time we'll be collecting is forest management plans, any conservation easements, any plans for the property, and then we'll get you an offer sent out within 1 to 2 weeks. From there, if you decide, we can issue that first payment within the first 30 days. And regardless of where we are in the year, you get a full payment for the full year. It's not prorated. So that's a nice perk for landowners. Then within the next 3 to 6 months, we'll schedule a site visit for one of our technicians to come out and do a carbon inventory of your carbon stocks and verify that. And then once a year, we ask landowners to complete an annual survey. And that's just once a year. And again, it's online form. And if it takes 10 minutes, that would probably be overestimating. So pretty simple process once you fill out an application, and we're here to help you along the way. So there's my slides and my contact info. I did see some questions pop up in the chat, but you feel free to shoot me an email if something doesn't get answered today, or give me a call. I'm happy to answer anything.
Cool. Thanks so much, Jordan. We did have a couple of questions in there that we'll get to, and I guess I just want to ask one of my own first. When you were talking about the kind of the different models for payments to landowners, I know it's relatively new, but with your Midwest landowners, do you see more often folks going the profit share route or kind of the flat rate route?
So when we give an assessment and an offer, we'll actually show those numbers of projected flat rate payment and projected revenue share payment. And so most often it's more lucrative for landowners to go the revenue share. Now, I recognize that at some point the carbon market will probably plateau, and then there's that option to go back to that flat rate. So for most landowners, it's much more lucrative to do the revenue share.
And you said that option to change that payment schedule is every 5 years, right? You could swap back and forth if you needed.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thanks. Josh, did you have some others for us?
Yeah, I've excuse me, I've got several questions for you, Jordan, but
Sure.
before that, I thought maybe we could answer the questions from Dana in the chat. Did you say you're able to see those, or do you want me to read those
Yeah.
off too?
I mean, why don't you? I think it'd be good to read them just in case people can't see the chat. I can see them, but
Yeah, let me read them and then maybe you can answer them. So
Sure.
the first question is, does anyone look at seaweed farms for ocean or mangroves?
So in terms of our program, no. They have to be, we're not limited by cover type, but there has to be a commercial market for the timber. Obviously, I'm not too up to snuff on mangroves, but it needs to be a commercially viable species.
That makes sense. I just had one comment on that, and maybe Dana, you're already aware. I don't know if other participants on here are aware, but there's definitely a difference between carbon sequestration and storage and oxygen supply, right? So one of the misconceptions about forests is that forests are the lungs of the earth. That's actually not true. The lungs of our earth are ocean critters like phytoplankton, diatoms, things like that. So Jordan had some great statistics in one of his slides on things that grab carbon, but the main lungs of the earth are actually the ocean. So there's two different things going on there. So maybe that's sort of the root of your question, Dana, but it's good to keep those two things separate, like what's pumping oxygen into the world and then what is actually grabbing carbon. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're definitely two different things. Dana's next question Are paper applications available? I'm thinking of landowners in the UP who don't have internet access.
We can send hard copies. I'll be honest, though, it becomes really difficult if they don't have access to the internet to work with us, just because we rely so much on emails and attachments that way. We can send hard copies of information, but as we get further through like the application, it would become rather challenging.
Great. We just had another one, Jordan. I'll read it off to you. You said an applicant must have 40 acres. Can I enroll if I have 30 acres of mature forest in Michigan and 200 acres in, I'm sorry, Connie, I can't pronounce that county. Rappahannock, am I saying that right? Rappahannock County, Virginia?
Yes, Rappahannock County.
All right, I got it right.
Nice.
Chalk it up to luck.
Yes, because your combined ownership of forest land is about 40, that would be eligible for our program.
That's a great question. So
Thank
they don't have
you.
to be contiguous, in other words.
No,
That's
correct.
a great, yeah. Thank you for asking that, Connie. I hadn't thought of that one. All right, I don't see any more in the chat right now, Jordan. So I'm going to throw a few at you if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'll start with a couple easy ones. So you've got FSC as a certification. Has anybody at Forest Carbon Works thrown around the idea of SFI or American Tree Farm System? I only say that because those two are far more common in this part of Michigan. And I realize Tree Farm doesn't carry market sharing advantages at mills, but it's an individual inspection form that actually is gone through with landowners, which separates it from a lot of these other certification programs. And it's one that once people are enrolled, they tend to want to continue to enroll every 5 years, and there's no cost associated with that, at least right now. So I was just curious if you guys have talked about Sustainable Forestry Initiative in the American Tree Farm System in addition to a Forest Stewardship Council certification.
So for our business, we have not. We early on we did look at those, but FSC had the capacity to take on, and it's more, I guess, nationally known than SFI. While SFI I feel is more digestible and easy to understand. Same with Tree Farm. FSC was chosen just because of their capacity and ability to work with us. With that being said, we don't prohibit a landowner if they want to get a tree farm or have a tree farm or want to get SFI certified. That's totally fine and okay. But right now, FSC is our choice for the certification.
Great, thank you. My other question, you mentioned regional licensed foresters. I'm just wondering if you can define licensed. Do you guys gauge that based on which state you're dealing with? Like, can you elaborate on what you mean by licensed forester?
So we each have regions, and all of our foresters have been certified foresters through SAF. And then
Okay,
they
that's a
also
great one.
have, yep. And then they also, like for me, I'm a registered forester in Michigan, in Wisconsin, and each state has their own requirements. So each state we're working in, we have those certifications by our foresters, as well as the certified forester I don't know, certificate from SAF.
Okay, so SAF cert is always going to be the case?
Yes.
That's all right. That's awesome. That's what I was wondering. And then it sounds like you also tend to lean towards the registered forester route for that other one, like in Michigan, because we have other ones too. Like you could be Association of Consulting Foresters here. You could be a certified forest stewardship plan writer. There are other credentials. That's where that question is drawn from. But I like that the SAF requirement is that can be a challenging one to get because it actually has an exam.
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that. That means you guys are working hard to get the cert.
Appreciate that.
Next question, which is always the one I ask with carbon programs. So you've got a 35-year monitoring period, and obviously the goal in most cases is not to make it into a parking lot, but in theory, could somebody do that after the 35 monitoring period is up? Is that at the end of any agreement with Forest Carbon Works?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that's not what typically people will do, but it's just good to know, like contractually, what are people held to?
Yep. At that point, there's no obligations.
Okay.
And the thing is, during that monitoring period, if a landowner wants to know what that really means in terms of like forest land coverage, I can get those numbers in the assessment process before anybody even signs to know what their harvest flexibility would be during that period. Generally in Michigan, it's going to be that across their entire forested ownership, it's going to be anywhere from like 8 square feet to 25 square feet of basal area on average across the entire property.
Okay.
So you can imagine that's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, yeah. Connie posted another question, and it's actually very much related to what my next question was going to be. So I'll just roll hers into my question.
Mhm.
Mine has to do with are there management scenarios that would absolutely not be eligible? So you mentioned that you guys gauge what the baseline management prescription is, and then it sounds like you do like a site specific calculation to determine, what are the carbon inputs and outputs. Um, Connie's question was specific to oak wilt, which is after 10 years, what if oak wilt kills all the trees in the forest? So this would have to be a forest that has red oak and nothing but,
Mhm.
which can happen with black oak and northern pin oak and red oak and parts of uh, the counties I serve. But there's that, and then there's also the situation of a common oak management prescription in this part of Michigan would be a pretty heavy cut via some sort of seed tree cut or a shelterwood cut, and that can often be the case even if there are no forest health issues. So I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on management prescriptions that might be silviculturally acceptable, but maybe not acceptable for forest carbon works. And then
Sure,
maybe to Connie's question as well with the trees getting wiped out by oak wilt.
sure. I'm just writing notes so I can try to remember all parts of that question. It's a
Yeah,
good question.
sorry.
No, it's a good question. Limitations on prescription. So unique to our program is we're setting aside that 10% allotment to allow for forest management activities. Um, a huge part of my job is reviewing within a 25-year payment period, that first 25 years, what is planned. And so I will provide to you, the landowner, the amount that would be compatible with our program in that assessment process. And from there, we always like to involve a third-party forester. And they say, well, is this a number that we can do, accomplish our management goals, or is this not going to work for us? And so that's the first kind of step in the process. I will say if a landowner is purely driven by economics and, economic rotation ages, that becomes more difficult to work with. While we're not limited by species or cover type, it becomes pretty difficult to work with a species like aspen, which I don't know if you guys have a ton of in that part, but a species that really needs to regenerate through aggressive harvesting at fairly, young rotation ages. So that one might be a tough fit, but there is a nice window where trees are 5 inches in size, where you might not have a harvest for another 25 years with an aspen. It might be a perfect fit with that, all that being said. So it really depends on the objectives for the property, how amendable those forest management plans. But if you're pretty fixed on economics, it's probably not a great fit for us. Um, the oak wilt and trees dying part, ideally we'd want you to be proactive and you could exceed that 10% allotment if you had oak wilt bearing down on your property or on your property to get out there and try to be proactive in the event that that didn't happen and any forest health pathogen for that matter came in and wiped out your forest. We would want to do a re-inventory of that property, and that's part of the annual survey is to try and catch things like that occurred on the property that were significant. We do a re-evaluation of the property to see what the carbon stocks are currently at. So you can imagine if that happened, there would be a lot less carbon being grown on that property if all those trees are dead. So that's we need to reevaluate that situation. Was there one other part that I missed here in this question, Josh?
No, that was a great answer. If I understood you right on the aspen cover type, which we do have a lot of around here,
Okay.
and patch cutting is very common. From a wildlife standpoint, I'm often having conversations with people about allowing retention along with those cuts so that you can let some aspen get mature to provide the wildlife value. And the byproduct of that is, of course, carbon, but the main goal is, certain wildlife use mature aspen as well. It's not all about the young aspen. Um, but if I understood you correctly, you were saying that if you were walking into a situation where people were on the lower end of a pulpwood diameter, to put it in boards and cords terminology, that basically because they're going to just be growing that aspen stand for the next several decades, that would actually be an eligible cover type. Did I understand you right on
That's
that?
correct. Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. It might be the perfect window of opportunity to capitalize on a carbon program, given the timing and the size of the aspen. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's great. Connie asked another question. What happens if during the 35-year monitoring period the owner passes away? Does the estate become the recipient of the payments?
Yes, it is transferred. So the way it works is our contract is tied to the deed. So regardless if a landowner passes away, they sell it, it is tied to that property regardless of who owns it. In the case if it sells during the payment period, those payments are then issued to the new landowner.
And that makes sense. Our state specific tax exemption program here, the qualified forest program, operates the same way. The program stays with the land.
Yep,
So that's
same way.
that's not uncommon, I would say, for a lot of programs like this. The only other one I had, Jordan, was just a comment and more for the benefit of the participants here, which is our local land conservancies that do conservation easements. A lot of easements that landowners here have with these local conservancies are often very compatible with management. So a lot of times the easements pertain to no more structure development and things like that, like making sure that, for example, if they have an easement, you absolutely won't be making it into a parking lot 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, even after a forest carbon works contract is up. So there are quite a few actually, landowners in this part of Michigan who have both conservation easements and are also enrolled in programs like the Qualified Forest Program, which requires a certain level of commercial timber harvesting. So
Mhm.
I think we're in a lucky place in terms of having that compatibility where everybody is sort of thinking about wise, sustainable habitat management and understanding that tree removal is part of that equation. So just throwing that out there because you had a bullet point about easements. So I just wanted everybody on here to know that we have some really great conservancies around here that understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And if a landowner is not sure, it never hurts. There's no obligation for an application. If a landowner fills out, they just want to know, what an offer looks like, or if their conservation easement would be compatible. That's something we can certainly look at. But yeah, thanks for bringing that point up, Josh.
Yeah, you bet. That's all I had, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. Danny, did you have anything else, or did anybody else on this meeting have any other questions?
I don't have any from here at the library. And I do think we caught them all in the chat. Were there any final things, I guess, for you, Jordan, that we didn't cover or wanted to share before we go?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Danny and Josh both have my contact info as well as a PDF of my presentation. So yeah, happy they can share my contact if you want to get a hold of me. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Jordan. And just a reminder for those that are online with us, we are recording the presentation, so we will get a chance to post that eventually on the YouTube page for Mason Lake Conservation District. So if you need to reference that again or double check any of the stats and contact info that Jordan shared, that'll be up there as well. So I want to just remind folks, we'll have one more of these sessions for the winter, for our Winter Wednesday webinars. So the third Wednesday next month, we'll be talking about agroforestry. So bringing agriculture and forestry together with Nate Ayers from the West Michigan Agroforestry Partnership. And so that'll kind of be a little more look at forest farming side of things. And that'll wrap up our webinar series for the winter. So thanks again, Jordan, for joining us, and everybody have a great Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jordan.
Yeah,
Great
thanks, Jeff.
presentation.